There's no really magic. It's just being honestly truthful about what you have, what you don't know. Honest and transparency, I think, is the best way to persuade people. In fact, if you're looking at how sales works, the best salespeople don't sell. You want to buy, but they don't sell you. I think that's how I do that naturally, maybe from my past. But yeah, honesty and transparency is definitely the key to persuasion. Right. Good to see you, Alex. I'm Giacomo Bastianelli. I'm Italian. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Rainbow Crops. What we do at Rainbow Crops, as you can imagine from the name, we develop new crop genetics, combining breeding, multiplex genome editing, and AI, and to tackle very complex traits. So traits that are not influenced by the single genes, but multiple genes and gene networks. And we do it in a scalable way. Just raised a seed round of 9.7 million euros. And then a few months back, we received a grant from the Gates Foundation for $7 million. Great to be here.
Well, I have to say, this is one of my favorite conversations because, it's like they're coming back. Because if you look back a year, we were actually talking about your pre-seed when you raised your pre-seed, and I already knew you're very special. So the best thing about this podcast, you know that good people are going to come back 18 months later. That's so you have friends already. I think I have already one founder who's on my third episode. There you have it. So I'm expecting you back in 24 months. Otherwise, I'm worried. I'll have to call you. Well, it's wonderful speaking with you again. How did you meet your lead investor for this round?
It was very random because they, if I recall correctly, they reached out about, I think it was in April, May last year. After we announced the creation of the company and the pre-seed investment, they reached out and it's an Italian investor. It was not at all in my radar just because they've never invested in agri-tech. And also it's kind of a particular fund because it's a business angel driven fund with then some other also institutional investors from Italy. They're kind of a tech transfer fund initially from Turin, the Polytechnic of Turin. So that was not at all in my list of leads and targets. So that was unexpected.
Amazing. And by the way, I speak very highly of LIFTT. They're a really good investment firm. And tell me, when you were thinking about now starting the raise, right? So you said about a year ago is when you started thinking about the next round?
Well, we were planning already before, but let's say that early 2025, that's where we were on the roadshow.
Okay.
And then we created a company in 2025 in April. Then we had that pre-seed money. And then from that moment on, things accelerated. But we already started preparing all the roadshow before.
Yeah. So would you say that immediately as you close your pre-seed, you already started preparing for your seed round?
Yeah, I would say even before, a few months before closing, because as you know, it takes some time before you actually announce and you close from the moment you have advanced due diligence. So whenever we had advanced due diligence anyway for the pre-seed, then we already start reaching out for the actual seed. So we had already all the material ready for the seed round before we finalize the pre-seed. Makes sense?
Yeah. So I want our listeners to just understand what like a great CEO is doing. He's not just looking at his current money that he's just raising. He's already thinking ahead for the next round, right?
Yeah.
And I'm curious if you agree with me. My belief is that the best time to raise money is when you have money in the bank.
Totally.
That's the bet. So, okay, excellent. How did you prepare? Like, what does preparing mean for you? Was it, look, we're going to build a list of who we think is going to participate in this round? Was it, we need to make sure that we have a certain milestone roadmap, exit scenarios? Like, what does preparing mean for you for a seed round?
Yeah, so I consider that I have one shot. So it means that the first interaction should be the best that I could make. And it's not about the look. I mean, not about the look of the company or the look of the material, but it is actually the content of the material. So we spend quite a bit of time making the good material for the potential investors. And one way we were happy with that, so we iterate a few times. Then I start So preparing is, I always think I have one shot with an investors. Having also worked in a VC, I know that you see so many people, so many companies, and sometimes, the first impression is everything. So in order to get a good first impression would be to have the right material. So it means that the pitch deck that would work, in the sense that after the pitch, the investor would be like, okay, I still have some questions. Kind of interesting. Let's move on to the next stage. So I worked on that front to prepare that pitch deck that would allow me to go to the next stage. That was all that I wanted. Now, of course, to prepare a good pitch deck, you need to prepare also the back of that. So if you have a plan, it's not just you cannot work a high level plan in the pitch deck and then not having the back, the really detailed plan in order to support that. Because then if they ask you, okay, can you give more details? And then you need to elaborate from that and you have a given thought, then it's a problem. So the problem is like it's a kind of a ground up approach where you always, you show the tip of the iceberg, but the iceberg and the foundation is strong, if that makes sense.
And yeah, that makes perfect sense. It's like I tell people the pitch deck is like the teaser, right? And then that makes you want to watch the movie, right? Like the Odyssey, it's pretty cool, or Dune, like pretty cool teasers, right? Like those trailers are good, but then there has to be a whole movie behind it. You go in and you're like, oh, well, that was just 2 minutes of cool, and then the rest of it absolutely sucks. I think that's not gonna work. So take us, just curiosity. Did you hire a professional deck designer for your deck, or did you do it on Claude or some other tool?
I do it homemade. Let's go this way. So I did it myself. This is not my first companies, and I'm also kind of a designer, UI designer. I built designs in my past, so I practice that little art, if you wish, of communication design, and that's something that I really enjoy doing it. So for me, it's just a pleasure to do that rather than. And sometimes it's hard to you can give it to PR agencies and they will do a great job. But of course, it's going to take your time or work back and forth with them to transfer the understanding, how you want to communicate the story, the flow, and they can give you advice. But in the end, it must come from you. And otherwise, it will feel a bit kind of externally engineered, rather than if you build it yourself. So if you can, do it yourself and then maybe have a polisher afterwards. And if not, just to let you know that you will need to do quite a bit of work with the agency to let them understand what you want, understand the business more in depth. And that's from there, all the story will flow.
Now, the data room itself, was it built on Notion, Google Sheet, Google DocSend? Just what was the infrastructure you built it on?
I think we use Ideals.
Okay.
So it's a platform for hosting the due diligence. Then in terms of material, basically it was a kind of, let's say that the most important material was for us, of course, the teaser, fine. Then the business plan. The business plan was done in PowerPoint. Then we had financials on Google Sheet, and then I had results. So all the like a results data package where I put all the detailed results of the scientific part, and that was separated from the business plan because otherwise it would have been 120 slides. So I kept the two separately, and then I started uploading into a due diligence software. In this case, it was Ideals, where all the different folders, but nothing I would say is particular on this front. I think it's more the material that you prepare.
Yeah. Okay. Anything about the materials that you think made an impact for those funds that were moving forward that you thought that really stood out, that maybe you haven't seen other founders do or haven't done well that you did well in your data room? Perhaps the scientific studies or the results that you were able to display in a way that others can understand more clearly?
Yeah, definitely on the results front, making the results understandable also for non-technical people. So I think the challenge there is this one, is to have, since that material, that the results deck will be looked by both the investor, sometimes they don't have the technical expertise to go and to understand all the details, but then also of experts looking at that material for them to understand if it's really is good quality and if it makes sense and it's solid. So I think that's the challenge of having in the same deck of, let's say, results and technology, call it as you like, results and data, a flow that people not expert could follow, hypothesis. And then you say, we look at this, we demonstrated that. And then also at the same time, in the same deck, having the depth of data, and sometimes, you could use some jargon that might be useful for the technical expert, but still not going on the way of understanding for a non-technical to go through the flow and say, okay, I look at these results data, some stuff I didn't understand because it's normal, I'm not an expert, but I could understand the whole story there and why is compelling. I think that's a key. You could separate the two and you could create something, more simpler but that's, I think it's a double work, and I think it's a good exercise to do this way. It will help you also to crystallize how you can communicate complex results and data in a simple way.
And for those who are struggling to convey those complex results, is there a trick that you use? Did you use AI in any way, in like a Claude agent, to just give you, hey, take this information and give it to me in a way that a 5-year-old would understand it? I do a lot of notebook LM. Like, I take people's pitch decks, I upload a notebook LM and just like, give me a podcast. And it's like, well, this sugar technology is like essentially a net that separates the larger molecules from the smaller molecules. I'm like, all right, I can understand the net is like, and that's what separates some part of the type of sugar and reduces it and creates sugar reduction. Like, okay, I can get the analogy around my head.
So I haven't used necessarily LLM for doing that part. I use LLM to polish my language. Okay. So to polish, to transform certain phrases that I wanted to be more crispy, more impactful. But the actual, what I wanted to build, the story flow, I built it myself. And I think it's important. You could have used and say, okay, give me some ideas of flow that you would take to explain this. I haven't done that because maybe I have it already in my head, but then I use LLM to actually polish certain phrases. Of course, I'm not a communication expert, especially in English. I'm Italian, so that helped really to polish the language, and that was very useful.
Take us through the mapping of investors, right? So we talked about LIFTT not being on that list. How big was the list that you had in mind? Just to give a sense of to our listeners, hey, look, I actually thought this list is going to be this many. It would probably take this many conversations. And then this is how many I would then eventually, like, what was the sales funnel like that you projected? What was it like in reality? So our listeners can understand the amount of work this takes. I speak with founders raising every day, and they're all telling me the same thing. It's harder than ever to find investors who are actually deploying. And getting access to those leads takes time founders just don't have. Every month fundraising is a month burning runway. This is why we created FTW Plus, a community of founders actively fundraising. The world's most accurate agri-food tech investor database, plus connecting you directly to ideal target investors and a community of support and accountability. Guaranteed results or your money back. Apply today at www.joinftw.com/hub.
Yeah. So I use Trello, Ghent, Kanban to build the list and then move it to different stages. So the list, I don't have it right now. I think it was around maybe 60 investors, kind of qualified. I didn't do, scraping, and then it could have been probably 200 if I would have gone that way. But I was kind of already having manually curated list of investors that I knew or that I've heard or that I've seen in the news that invested in companies that would be a fit. So that was the initial, and I would say probably of, let's say, the 60s, it was 10 corporate, 10 business angel type of funds, and then the rest was like VCs, mainly in Europe with some North American that could invest in Europe. So that was the list. And then I had this Kanban way where I would be, not contacted, reached out, send the pitch, the teaser, second call, third call, then NDA, due diligence, term sheet, and closing. And of course, the majority were dropped at the, I would say maybe at the first or second, maybe at the teaser level when I sent the feedback, and then after the first call and second calls. I don't recall really to give you the numbers, but there's roughly the flow.
Okay, great. So to our listeners, actually, this is a very small data set. I mean, and it speaks volumes to Giacomo being a great CEO. What were in your mind, like the traits of an investor? Like some of them you mentioned was they had to deploy cash in my geography, right? If they don't have a history of deploying to Europe, probably not going to be deploying to Europe in this way. So what other triggers were you looking for that you said, like, actually this is something that would tell me that they're a good fit?
And this is why, for example, LIFTT was not in my list, because I was looking at investors who, some, deep tech investor invested in agri-tech sector, not necessarily agri-biotech, but at least in the agriculture sector. There were some investors in climate, but I have to say that the majority of kind of climate investors that they said, oh, we invest in climate, therefore agriculture is on our scope. Then when they look at what we were doing, I think we were a little bit too sophisticated for them as a company. So you need to have an investor that for some reason got very interested in this topic, for example, LIFTT, or that they have some expertise and understanding. Otherwise, and I knew that I would lose a lot of time with these kind of investors that were not necessarily a fit, and maybe they would drag me in one or two calls just to learn about the topic. That's okay. It's also a good exercise. Actually, the best exercise you actually want to pitch the first time. Maybe this is a good advice. Don't go to your first tier 1 investors in the first month. Just pitch around, pitch to other second tier, third tier, maybe even third tier first. So then you can practice, especially if they get it themselves, they're not specialized, and you're talking about something a bit complex as a topic, then you know that you have simplified the message to the core, and that would be helpful also for others.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's fascinating to see that you do the work, but then often the investor that actually invests outside of that initial scope. And yet, and I'm curious if you agree on this, I believe this is actually almost like a supernatural thing where if you didn't do that work of preparation, you wouldn't have gotten that serendipity in place, right? It's like you needed still to do the right steps, and then you open up yourself to like the magic of the process. Because there's very much a magic to the fundraising process where you just, like, okay, I didn't know this person could come into my life, but they did. But it took me all that work to be ready for that person to come into my life.
Yeah, it's that synchronicity, call it as you'd like, right? That happens. And I think if you want to take advantage in a positive sense on that synchronicity, I think spending the time to simplify and to really go to the core of who you are, what's your plan, will help with those kind of outsiders, because most of the time they don't necessarily add the depth of expertise. So if you can work out a good message, understandable, that will work with those external. I mean, I talked to the super expert, funds that they invested in this sector, and they were interested. Then for X reason, they dropped out. But with those, you don't even need to talk about the science, because they know very well what we're talking about, which is great. But if you start with those, you will not necessarily work out this simplification of your message.
Yeah. It's often the simple message is the one that's the hardest to convey.
Yeah.
It's like subtracting words, saying less, but conveying them with depth is really important. Last couple of things that come to mind. One is, has your thoughts about fundraising and art of persuasion changed or evolved? Like, you've really had an amazing ability to persuade people to take a position, a pretty significant position in an area that's not easy to fund. It's not considered to be a sexy area, in the very least. I would say we're not right now at the top of our hype cycle. So how does persuasion work? What is your secret to persuading someone to believe in an area where so many people have actually lost money?
Yeah, I would say, first of all, you need to be truly convinced about yourself about what you're proposing. If you are, and that's why it distinguishes kind of the positive persuasion versus deception, meaning that deception is when you know that what you have is not good and you try to persuade to buy it. But if you're truly, and that requires exercise, that requires understanding of your business, and if you truly believe that what you're proposing is valuable and is worth looking at, and you have the passion and the capacity to convey the message, I think that's a persuasion. There's no really magic. It's just being honestly truthful about what you have, what you don't know, especially, and being transparent on that. Just sometimes you don't know. You don't know if that part is gonna work. And just being very, very honest and transparency, I think, is the best way to persuade people. In fact, if you're looking at how sales works, the best salespeople, they don't sell. You want to buy, but they don't sell you. They don't want to sell you. So I think that's how I do that naturally, maybe from my past. But yeah, honesty and transparency is definitely the key to persuasion.
Okay, so let's unpack that. I think this is actually going to take us to the end of this conversation, which is, and I find it difficult often when I work with deep tech companies, right? And I'm in the space with you, right? Like we're both fundraising, we're both looking, and often the certainty that the scientific community has around a solution, they say, look, we think it's going to, like when you talk to a scientist about certainty, and I would often ask the question, how much money do I have to raise for you to be 100% certain it's going to work? Like, I have no problem raising money. Like, I just tell me the number. How much do I need to raise to be 100% certain that whatever we're saying is going to work? And they're like, well, look, and that's challenging for me as a salesperson. Like, I just tell me the number and I'll do it, but you need to be 100% certain. So how do you deal with that? Because you're dealing with very deep tech, right? It hasn't, it has clearly had some positive results on corn. You've done testing, but it's not out there. It's typically a very heavily regulated space. A lot of misunderstanding of what transgenomics and looks like. A lot of fear, especially in Europe, and you're dealing with big problems that not necessarily there's a high chance of failure. So how do you convey on one hand certainty that the science is rock solid, on the other hand be mindful of we're doing something very cutting edge, it might not work, you might lose all your money.
Yeah, I think it goes to exactly what I said, is being honest about let's say the probability of things happening. I see reality as a probability matrix. And so whenever I said, okay, that's some milestones, how, and this is always ask myself, how certain am I of that milestones being hit? Is that 95? You always have something that could happen. And then if you convey that probability estimation, then the investors look at you and said, okay, well, I see there are some areas with some risks. I understand what are the factor it's influencing those risks. And now I understand. Now I can understand you, why you're like on that, you're more confident. On the other part, you're like, okay, well, we need to work and still there is uncertainty. So I think if you put together that model, probabilistic model into when you present even your pitch, I think it would create the confidence and the trust that in the aftermath is persuasion, but it's a natural persuasion because you're being honest and you're being thoughtful about what you're proposing, and you're not selling, yeah, we're going to build it for sure, and this is going to happen like that. No, you're being honest about the reality. And then that's where the buy comes in naturally. You don't need to sell anymore. They will come to you and they will ask for a second meeting, a third meeting, and then discussions further.
Giacomo, can you give us an example of that? How would that sound with rainbow crops, as much as you feel comfortable sharing? Like, how would that, if you would take me through that, saying, hey, how would that sound in your own company, right? When you're selling your company, where is the certainty? Where's the probability? Can you give us maybe like a 30-second or 1 minute of, when I talk about rainbow crops, this is when I talk about certainty. This is where I think we still have a gap that we need to fill.
Yeah.
And I was transparent with our investors about that throughout the whole process.
Yeah. For example, let's say on two examples, one was about this regulation. So change of regulation, which was definitely a driver for pushing through the finish line the investment. Some investors there don't have inside information about that. We had some inside information because we were connected with people working with the European Commission and working with certain groups to understand how would that process would look like in terms of probability. What is the probability that will go through? And so I was presenting to the investors and listen, let's say early 2025, I would be, okay, well, it's going to happen. I would say 60%. There is a risk that there is a patent aspect of non-patenting traits, which could affect us negatively. So just to let you know. And then after 6 months or 1 year, then things were a bit different. And so I said, listen, things have changed. So when we're looking at a place where 90% it will go through as everyone would like, and we would like, and also at the same time, the risk of patenting just is dropping to 10%. So that is a way that I was conveying a probabilistic evaluation on that component of our business plan, which was a very, very important and definitely played a role to push through the finish line some investors.
Beautiful. Look, I think we could speak for another couple of hours, and I would gladly do that over. I think we'll have to do it over some tiramisu in some cafe in Rome. That's probably where it's going to end up between me and you, for sure. Because I really, I felt that the first time we spoke that you were one of the best CEOs I've spoken to, and I'm not surprised that you were able to get to this space. And I'm very, very proud of you. Simple question, is there something that you'd like to give to the community? That's type of founders that you like to talk to or investors? How do you support the community given your unique background? And then the second thing is there something that you need from us, right, to support you back, that we can support you in the next year?
Definitely. I would be very happy to talk to other founders who are looking to raise seed or Series A, to provide any feedback on the pitch deck. That's probably where I'm actually, it's fun for me and I can have some insights for them. And then, that would probably be the best. It's like 20, 30 minutes call with me and I'm very happy to do that. And then at the moment, I'm just building up the team and start reaching out to introduce ourselves to some top, let's say tier 2 kind of clients, so seed and breeding companies. But I would be particularly interested if somebody has contacts with the, down the value chain. So not seed, but actually the actual material that's generated from the plants. So talking about CPG and food companies that might looking up the value chain and to do something in crop genetics. So that would be interesting for us.
And what would be a name of one such company, for example?
For example, could be a PepsiCo, let's say, and those kind of equivalent. Maybe Unilever, sometimes they have some products that they of course.
And why is that important for you? They're not backwards integrated, right? They don't own the farmland. So why is it important for you to be speaking to those players?
Also to understand deeply the value chain of a specific crop. So that's also specific insights that I can learn from those companies. Because if you talk just to seed companies, then you know all the part up to the farmer. But now what happens after the farmer? Why the farmer is selling to, how is it selling to their customer, which is the grain processing or plant processing companies. And then from that, how does it go through the rest up to the consumer?
So thank you so much, my friend. This has been a really great conversation. Learning from you is a real gift. I'm excited to support you over the next year.
Thank you, Alex. Always a pleasure. And hope I can be back in a couple of years to talk about something else.
I already know the exact date we need to be back. That's funny.
All right. Love that.
It'll be around Q2 2028.
Amazing.
One more thing. Don't close this episode yet. If you got value from this conversation, here's what I need from you. A 5-star rating, 1 comment, 20 seconds of your time. That's the deal. A 5-star rating means more founders find this content, and every time a founder raises, all boats are elevated. Every week, I pick one random comment and send that person a complimentary copy of Investment Climate, the book. 50 sales playbooks from founders who actually raise money during the fundraising winter. Real strategies, real closes, real numbers, not theory. So if you want a copy, comment below, and if you haven't followed the show yet, do that too. And if there's a guest you want us to bring on the show, just drop us a note or send us an email. We'll read each and every one. Until then, keep on raising.